Thanks a lot for this very kind introduction. We have the starting slide. And thanks for the invitation. Jaromir, I don't know if you were here somewhere up there. Last year, I was happy to be on the front cover of a magazine called Nordic Life Science Magazine. It covers every life science activity in the Nordic countries, and they had heard about us because we bought a clinical asset. And then they thought our story was so interesting that they wanted to interview us, and they even put us on the front page. And it was very nice because it came out. It came out just on the occasion of a Nordic Life Science meeting, which is a partner meeting that is held every year. Last time in Stockholm, and there I met Jaromir, and he apparently read this magazine, and or at least the article about me. I was fascinated by the story and asked me for my autograph on this. So when he mailed me a few months ago and asked, "Can you remember me?" I said, "Of course, I'm not a football star, you know, so not so many people ask for my signature, for my autograph." So I, of course, accepted. Oh, I did something. Of course, accepted to come here. And I will try to give you my personal story about how it is to work in the pharma industry. I've been around in different places, and now, as we mentioned, run our own company called PILA Pharma. And PILA, I founded the company 3 years ago, and PILA is, I got inspired by this because in the spare time, since I'm not working as a vet, I have Icelandic horses at home and I breed. And my first foal in Sweden was very fast, and in Icelandic, being very fast is called PILA. So I have a horse called PILA, and then when I started up this company, I was thinking, well, but I want to challenge the normal way of developing diabetes treatments, pharmacological treatments. I want to challenge this very long process and try to do it faster. So we called it PILA Pharma. And we also, and we will see that here, it had designed a logo. This is the first thing. I grew up in the pharmaceutical industry, as you heard, and corporate visual identity is very important. So we started off with a logo, and you see the arrow and the tablet that we hopefully will develop. This is our logo. So we had a dual title for today, and the first one was from the magazine here. If I'm right, this could be a really big thing. And I think this is what drives me. I saw something. If I was right, it could really change the lives for diabetics and maybe also benefit the social or the cost spendings that we every year lay down on treatment of diabetics. And since I'm now a little bit post the startup phase, I'm also being I get on covers. People call me to interview me. So I do that, of course, to attract investors for this process. It's very expensive to run a pharma company, even though you try to limit and only do the necessary things. But also our competitors have noticed us. So we feel that they know what we do, and also probably we have also begun to feel that they also try to limit our way forward. So this is a little bit maybe provocative, but it's also, how do you dare to challenge the big pharma guys or competitors in this field? But as I mentioned, I'm driven by, I saw something, and I think this could apply to any one of you. I was also a student, I was also a lecturer. Any one of you might come up and see something that could really make a difference for people, and I think that is a good enough reason to try to take it all the way to market. So, as the chairman, I don't know, was mentioned, we are based, if you go up north, you come up to Scandinavia, and we have Copenhagen here, and Malmö just on the other side. This is Sweden, and this is Denmark. And I am raised and born in Denmark, and have done my education there, and worked at Novo Nordisk. But a few years ago, I moved to the countryside in Sweden with my Swedish partner, and happened to end up here, or not end up, but Malmö Science Park here has a very good startup system, and if you dare starting up, you really need support from your surroundings. because it's about endurance. So this is a fantastic place to be, and still we can recruit people from Denmark. I had one colleague with me up there. He's not only my colleague, but he's also my son. And Gustav is helping me now, and it's really fantastic to be more people going out. I have to move this, I think, a little. So I was actually not giving really directions about what to tell you. But I was figuring out, you probably might be students, at least for a part of you might be students. So I was thinking I would like to tell you my story. It's probably not complete, it's probably not perfect. We don't know until later on. But we heard about the long process of developing new drugs. And this is a long process for me also. I was at Novo Nordisk in '99. I started as a PhD student, and the first experiment I did a discovery that there might be a new target in diabetes. And after a year, I made a hypothesis. Then I did a lot of experimental studies, and I published some of them. First the PhD thesis, and then after making a patent application, use patent to protect this target in diabetes, I published the papers. At least the key results. I still have something in the drawer that I never had time to publish. And at some point, Novo Nordisk decided not to pursue development of tablet-based treatments of diabetes, so small molecules. And they sold everything or closed it down. And I was like, oh, if I have one good idea in my life, this might be the one. You never know until later. But so I was lucky enough to be able to buy it from Novo. I was still employed at Novo at that time point, but this kind of triggered my new journey. So I left Novo later on and started as a, I'll get back to what I did, but we bought that. And so on my own expense, via my consultancy company at that time point, I had these use patents, meaning the right to treat diabetes in this way, blocking this receptor. It was issued in the US, first to treat obesity, and then to treat diabetes, also in the EU. And then I thought, okay, now I have a platform. If I can then combine with an asset that is not from scratch, you heard how long time that is, but this target has been investigated for other indications like pain and inflammation, and some of these clinical assets had been put on hold. So we were thinking maybe we can get access to one of these assets and jump to clinical trials instead. And this is what we've done. Last year we bought this XEN-D0501, and we are now in the clinical trial phase. So from being a startup, started 3 years ago, we have jumped to late stage. And I guess this is why we got on that cover, because it is challenging the normal way to do things. We of course don't know if we will succeed with it, but at least we will try. It's the only way forward for us, I think. So what we'll do is take it into first some safety trials and efficacy trials, and then hopefully sell to a big pharma that can then make these big phase 3 trials that you heard about before, and take it to market and hopefully get out there for the benefit of patients. So this long, long road, why do you do that? And this is actually from when I was a PhD student. I was interviewed to a business magazine in Denmark, and the title says, I get high on research. And probably some of you have the same feeling. If you're a little bit nerdy like me, if you like to combine things and so on, it's really, I mean, it gives a kick to learn new things. And also I have found out that also this about trying actually to put it forward, doing the business part is something that I really like. So as I say to the people who work with me now, we never know if we will succeed, but at least we should try, we should do our best, and we should have fun on the way. So we try to. So me, a little bit about me. As you heard, I'm a vet. About 20 years ago, actually 21 years ago, I became a vet. I wanted to be a horse practitioner, but never got that far. I worked a little bit as a vet at the vet school, so I'm familiar with lecture rooms. It's quite nice. And then I started at Novo Nordisk and got into diabetes research and stayed there for about 10 years doing both kind of very basic research like my own things, and then I got on to projects hired as a research scientist working with primarily insulin and GLP-1 products, so peptide-based drugs. I swapped to clinical pharmacology and was able to be on a very big insulin clinical project, and was involved in one clinical trial in phase 1. So I got a little bit of impression of how does that work, the whole regulatory setting, how do you actually do that. And of course, if you're a curious person like I am, being in a place like Novo Nordisk, it's really a fantastic company. It has a very good company culture, I think, and there's a possibility to learn about other areas than your own. So I was kind of reading about how do you do production, how do you do marketing, and things like that. So I got a little bit of that. I left Novo and I was associate professor in veterinary pharmacology for a while, and then I skipped that to work as a consultant, first in toxicology, and that has been a good thing now. And then later on started my own company to work again with diabetes as a consultant and also veterinary products. I've also been a vet expert, pharmacology expert for the Danish Veterinary Industry Association, and a lecturer again at the University of Roskilde in Denmark. 3 years ago we founded PILA as a subsidiary of PILA Pharma, so I have a company in Denmark and then a company in Sweden. And here we are. I have a little bit on my track record. This is a patent application that PILA now owns. It's about this project that we run. It was made at Novo, and I was one of the inventors, but we own it now. I was also involved in semaglutide. It's a GLP-1 analog, long-acting, once weekly. And we talked about high throughput screening from small molecule compounds before. In this project, we actually, even though it was a biologic project, they made several hundred analogs that we screened, and I was screening in diabetic mice, and was, I think, the first to point at this molecule as a suitable candidate. And also, at the same time, involved in insulin projects, and I was suggesting a new way to prolong insulin to have a very long and flat basal profile. So, but that is of course all owned by Novo now. I'm just happy to have the chance to learn how to do things. Also involved in other projects that never became anything because there's a high failure rate, of course, but you learn a lot in the industry. So what do we want to do? Well, I think we can, and this is what we aim at doing, making a new first-in-class oral tablet for diabetes treatment. And when you start a project, you should also always think about your target product profile, what you want to achieve. And in this case, in this very competitive setting in diabetes, you need to, of course, be able to regulate blood glucose because this is what is the acute problem. But since you probably know that diabetes is associated with obesity and hyperlipidemia, for instance, you should also be able to regulate lipids in your bloodstream and thereby your body weight, and then in turn hopefully at least not increase the risk for cardiovascular disease, but I hope we can probably reduce the risk, but we'll see. Then we think with this concept we may have additional beneficial effects, and since we have chosen a clinical ready compound that has a good safety profile, we think we are better on safety than others. And then for those who are going to make this, I think we can make this, since it's a small molecule, we can make it at an attractive production cost, and this molecule is extremely stable, something I've never seen so many small molecules assets, but I've seen some, and this is very, very stable. So this means that you might be able to have it stored and distributed with lower costs. And why is it important? Well, according to the World Health Organization, they released a report last year, and they had summarized that 25 years ago, actually this is a little bit backdated, but in 25 years, the number of diabetics worldwide has quadrupled, so 4 times as many. And this is insane. This is nothing that comes with, this is not normal. So it has to do probably with the environment and changing people move from countrysides into cities and changing their diets and have less activity. They have actually also, this is a slide I have from this WHO presentation, and they also have a slide with 25 years ago, there was slim guys with fat TVs, and now it's like fat guys with slim TVs. So people exercise less and sit more and eat maybe more, also unhealthy. Then there's of course the normal thing about age, and I'm in that group where I have to look out for just the age effect. But so what did I see? This is the first experiment I did as a PhD student. I was going to do a technical improvement of how to measure insulin sensitivity in rats. And we had read that if you gave capsaicin, it's the hot ingredient in chili, if you give that in a high dose to normal rats, then you can improve insulin sensitivity slightly. And we thought, okay, this is a nice model. We'll do it in diabetic rats. Maybe we'll get a bigger window. And so we gave a high dose of capsaicin under anesthesia and all that because it burns and stuff. And then after the first acute phase, you will get a kind of blocking of your sensory nerves where you have the receptor for capsaicin, the chili receptor, as I call it, or the TRPV1. And this is a slide for investors that are maybe not so into science as you are, but so this is, so if you have diabetic rats, they would normally develop hypoglycemia, I mean increased blood glucose levels over time. It's a spontaneous model that develops that. It's called a CDF rat. And then if you just with one dose block these receptors activity or the sensory nervous system, you could basically prevent that. And I was like, what? And I guess, I don't know if vets are used to, as veterinarians are used to integrate results. And I was just thinking, I must follow that. So I convinced my supervisors that I could change from this technical thing and go for this, trying to find out what is the role of this sensory nervous system. And as you can see, I discovered that in 1999, but I didn't publish it until 2007. And this is something we learn in the industry. Maybe you have a good idea, and here in the academic setting, of course, you need to do publications and things, but always think about protecting your ideas before you tell others about it. Because this is what I've learned. I think I get a lot of ideas, and I think that's just normal. But I found out that it's actually not so normal. So if you have good ideas, keep them to yourself, because everybody else will maybe try to take them from you. So if I can give one advice. So sensory nerves, you have probably, I don't know if you've had anatomy and physiology and that, but they are like nerves that come from the central nervous system and end blunt in the periphery. They're unmyelinated and they're designed to respond to noxious stimuli or damage to your body. So a lot of things happen if you have a damage to your body. You get inflammation with a lot of inflammatory cells, and they secrete a lot of different components that all can react with this receptor. And if the stimulus is high enough, you'll get an afferent stimulus, so saying run away, and if not, you will secrete neuropeptides. And we think, okay, this is the chili receptor. How could we be sure that it was this receptor that had this effect? So we did a series of studies and ended up with patenting, as you heard, the one that is now the basis for my company. And then we did publish some of the studies on how does it work. So we think it works both in regulating blood glucose via both insulin secretion and insulin sensitivity. And it also has effects on lipids. And we didn't look at cardiovascular, but we will hopefully do that. And after that, I actually presented the data. I never published them, but I presented it, and I still have the presentation, so I brought that for you. You can see it was Novo Nordisk at that time point. I was still there. So this is the receptor, a 6-transmembrane receptor, and it was cloned here in '97, and knockout mice were made, and they became available after year 2000. And I bought some of them and put them on a high-fat diet to see what does it do to oral glucose tolerance test. It's a standard test to measure if you can handle glucose. And as you can see, the mice that didn't have this chili receptor, they had a better glucose tolerance here. You give them glucose orally, and then you measure the level of glucose in the blood afterwards. And it was significant. And in fact, if you looked at them and said, okay, how were they before treatment and after these weeks of a high-fat diet, then you can see they actually we found that they didn't respond to this high-fat diet. They were kind of prevented from developing glucose intolerance. So we went on to, and we also saw that insulin secretion in these mice were improved. Then at this time point, as I said, a lot of companies have been looking at this TRPV1 receptor in pain and inflammation. And this compound called BCTC, there was 2 publications about it. It was probably not a development candidate, maybe due to tox, I don't know. But at least there were somewhere to start. So this was at Novo, then you just synthesize it and make it and do it. And we had it done, and we gave it to rats that were obese, pre-diabetic, and made the same glucose tolerance test. And we saw more or less the same picture, improved glucose tolerance. And here we also measured insulin and saw that yes, it was indeed associated with a better response in insulin. And in these mice we also measured, because the whole idea is that diabetes is an inflammatory disease, so you have to control inflammation. And we measured inflammatory markers in the fat in the gut, and 2 of these markers were significantly reduced. So apparently it could, so these glucose intolerance was, and insulin secretion can be improved if you use a TRPV1 antagonist, and it has something to do with blocking inflammation. And we then proposed that blocking TRPV1 receptor could be a new treatment of diabetes. And luckily for us, we're still not there yet, so that there is consensus, but some other groups have actually seen it. And 2 years ago, when I was trying to find a clinical ready compound, I talked to several companies, and I saw that some of these companies had actually tested their compounds and found results in a similar direction. So what is the proposed mechanism of action? Well, again, the sensory nerve, they respond with neuropeptides. Normally, if you're a normal person, there should be some interaction, but not a lot. And then something, if you have a lot of fat tissue and inflammation in your fat, you generate some inflammatory mediators that can activate this receptor, and thereby secrete some neuropeptides that can again block insulin secretion and inhibit insulin action, and then you have this vicious cycle. So if we have this antagonist, hopefully we can block that inflammatory response and prevent the development of diabetes. I think I will skip that. And others have also suggested that it might be true. This is a review from just a few years ago, where they summarized that yes, maybe this receptor has actually a role in things associated to the metabolic syndrome or diabetes. So we hope we're right. So where should we get in? When diabetics are diagnosed, approximately half of diabetics don't have a diagnosis yet. But when they, by chance or by coincidence or because they go to the doctor because they're a little bit tired or something, find out they have elevated blood glucose, the first thing that they are advised is you need to change your behavior. And I don't know about you, but at least I have a little bit difficulty in changing my behavior. And I think I think it's like that for everybody. But some actually, I think it's about 1/3 of the patients, they actually manage to get backwards and control their diabetes or get out of the pre-diabetes and diabetes by exercising and drinking water. So it's absolutely worthwhile to do that in a deficit population. But if you can't control your blood sugar, if you have way too high blood sugar, you must have some help, pharmacological treatment for that. And then you're put on tablets. First one tablet, and then it's more if it doesn't work enough. And metformin is an off-label tablet that is used worldwide, first line of treatment, and after that, other tablets are put on. And they all have very different pros and cons, and we hope to get it here after metformin. If this doesn't work, you will put on to injectable compounds, insulin and GLP-1 before. And this is, of course, less convenient. It's very effective. I mean, it's very, very good treatment, but it's less convenient for patients. In Japan, they feel like drug addicts if they have to inject themselves. And then, of course, it's a much more expensive treatment, and you have to put it in the fridge and stuff like that. So I think most patients, if they can stay on a tablet, they would prefer that. That's at least our assumption. I made this very comprehensive slide for you. No, it's a little bit, again, is there a room for new treatment? And I summarized the current drug classes in diabetes segment, and you have a number of tablets here, and then you have injectables here. And then when you, as a doctor, should select a compound to treat your diabetic patients, you should look at, maybe not the cost, but I think that's important for a patient. If you're not wealthy, cost is important. Then delivery, do you take it as a tablet or do you inject? I think I would prefer tablets to injectables at least. And then of course it should work. And then, as I told you before, it's not only glucose, it should also work on weight and also at least show an indication that it does not increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. And this is not a new but 10-year-old requirement by FDA that you should test your cardiovascular safety when you develop compound. Then, of course, there are the side effects. And for insulin and some other compounds, you get too low glucose, and that's not good either. People with type 1 diabetes, and I've spoken to parents of kids with type 1, they are awake for 18 years because they're so afraid that their kids get low glucose during night. So, but for type 2, it's less, type 2 diabetes, it's less. But of course, and when weight gain, insulin makes you grow. It's an anabolic product, so you put on weight. And then there are other side effects, and there are differences between compounds. But we think we can come in with this is our own way of making this, saying, okay, what about efficacy, hypoglycemia, risk of that, weight, and CVD, cardiovascular disease, and cost. If you're up here, you're good. If you're down here, you're not so good. And I think, we hope, we don't know yet, but we hope we can be comparable to GLP-1 analogs, which are very good. They are costly, and I think we will be better on cost and delivery convenience compared to them. But we don't know. Back to target product profile, there is some evidence that we might actually, from the literature, that there is an effect on this receptor on regulating blood glucose, but also body weight and cardiovascular disease. I will not go into the details about that. So the PILA business model, it's different from what you saw before, where you start with thousands of compounds and then end up with one, or hundreds at least. So what we did here is we got a good idea, we hope. We patented that good idea, and then we combine with this is PK curves from this compound, this Sendo compound that we bought from man, from these healthy volunteers. So we jumped straight into the efficacy testing and see if it works in the right model, namely man. And after that, we hope to find a partner to develop the whole way. We hope we will be cost effective. We are putting down a lot less money for this project than one would normally do. But of course, it's a long process, so we hope our patents will not be too old before we can exit. So this is the compound we bought. It comes from Big Pharma, so the whole package we heard about is all there. All the safety, all the tox, and all the ADME and all that. It's really a nice asset. It has been in 6 clinical trials. I mean, it does something, but it's all about the dose, you know. So if you go high up, you will have toxicity, but we know where the maximal tolerable dose is. And in this area, it is very well tolerated. And we also know from a recent study that the previous owner did in chronic cough, where it didn't work on treating cough, but we know that after oral delivery, it will inhibit the capsaicin-evoked cough, it's called. So if you inhale capsaicin, you will start coughing, and it's a way to test for this receptor, blocking this receptor or not. And we know that it will block this receptor by approximately 2/3. So we hope that it would work. So another thing I've learned during this process is that, of course, this costs money, and if you don't have the big money tank in the back from the Big Pharma, yet at least, then you're always on the road. I'm always out talking to investors and telling about this, but it's actually quite fantastic and stimulating because there's so many smart people out there, so many nice people who have comments, and some even invest in our company, which we're very happy for, and I hope I will make them a great return later on. We have a clinical development plan. We only have one asset. We are thinking about maybe including more projects to lower risk, because we have, as you heard, experienced that we are going to do this first clinical trial, but it seems that there is competition for these patients and we are small, so we don't have the same muscles to maybe take our space. So this is the current plan. We are delayed with this. We hope to be able to start this up maybe before we have the results, and then go to this full phase 2, whereafter we can hopefully sell. We've exploited, and this is what you have to think about when you cannot meet the timelines and you're on a small budget. What else can you do to make your project interesting? So we have consolidated our company. We have built a strong or small team, but very good. And we have quality documents and stuff like that in place. So this is also something you have to consider when you go from startup to small, medium-sized enterprise. And especially when you go into clinical development, you need to have all your procedures described. So this is just the same slide again. Long story, but hopefully we will get there at some point. Never give up, was I told by my PhD supervisor. And network, network, network. And this has taken me somewhere at least. But you can't do it alone. This is my scientific advisory board that are persons that I met via my time at Novo Nordisk. I'm deeply grateful for their support. At least in the startup phase, they have been helping setting this plan for going straight to man. And I have a team of smart people in our board. Top lawyer, me, biotech person coming from a Swedish investment fund, person with a very deep insight into marketing of diabetes products, and a person with experience in fundraising and medical and clinical development of compounds. So that's really good to have a team guiding us in where we go. And then this is a little bit dark, but this is our growing team from our first project day in May. And yeah, I need really to thank them because I'm running around and telling the story, but these guys are actually doing the work. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for a really inspiring talk. And as I promised, I think that you have heard a different story from the general pharma industry, classical way of developing new compounds. I found it extremely interesting, especially because of the topic, and I think that we might get some overlap even with the following lecture, so it will be actually interesting to hear from a different angle. So now I would like to open the place for questions. Yes, please.
Well, this was highly interesting.
Thanks.
Could you please stand up and speak loudly or use microphone?
Is there a microphone? Maybe.
The introduction or the discovery of TRPV1 antagonists has raised some initial issues or concerns regarding temperature control, body temperature control. So what is your experience with hypothermia or how might it negatively affect body temperature?
Yes, thanks, a very good question. This area of research was really hot until it became very not because of the first compound running into problems with hypothermia. Amgen had a compound that had temperature up to 40 degrees, and everybody said, "Ooh, we cannot control this." And they, of course, also helped that perception that this target was invalid in writings, journals about the invalidity of the target and not specifically their compound. I think we don't have a full overview of what is right and wrong in this, but what I have seen when I've reviewed the available material about compounds is that most of the compounds do have an initial effect on temperature. It's transient, and there's a difference in how long it lasts and if it's severe or not. We know, you can go in and check on our homepage, we have a link to the publication of our compound. We also have an initial increase in body temperature on the first day in healthy volunteers, but it fades out after 2 weeks. So we know, and that's why we dared taking on this asset. But of course, I have been talking to many about, do you dare taking? But as you told before, I'm a pharmacotoxicologist. I mean, you never have effect without having a side effects at some point. It's about the dose, and it's about understanding that. And I don't think people have really dug into what about PK profiles, what about Cmax, what about distribution and all these things. I don't think the mechanism behind this is really fully understood. But what we know is that the second generation TRPV1 antagonists actually are doable in terms of safety. And I also know that one compound is effective in pain and safe and is moving on to phase 3. So I think this area of research will have a new interest, I hope at least. I'm pretty sure about this asset here, but if it will work in diabetes, we don't know yet.
Thank you.
As an organic chemist, I missed some nice structures.
Yeah, I said that to my son. Oh, I should have brought structures.
Have you released the structure for your candidate?
No, that is the most well-kept secret, hopefully so far. But I know a lot about the other structures, but I can tell you, even as of it, I think it has a really nice structure. I like it. Some of the structures are similar. I'm not a chemist, so I would actually like some collaboration with some of you. Yeah, I mean, I can't go into details because I'm simply not, but I have studied it, and there are some series and different series, and some of them are based on resistant nephrotoxin, some of them are based on capsaicin, some of them are completely synthetic. And then all smart chemists have played around with different, you know, so. Yes, but at some point, yeah. But I can send you a review with structures if you like. Yes.
Keep your glucose level low.
Yeah. Other problems. We all have some. Yes.
More questions? I would have one.
Yes.
Actually, I understand your model, your theory about the glucose levels, but I see that you also claim to have weight loss.
Yes.
What is the mechanism there? It's just the glucose, lower glucose, which would...
We actually don't know. It might be via change in insulin sensitivity and insulin secretion. Maybe it's directly via this inflammation that you control. Maybe it's via increased energy expenditure. A little bit heat might be good, you know. Maybe it's exercise in a pill. So we don't know. But this is the next phase we're going into if we can finance it. And we will have a scientific advisory board meeting here later this autumn where we are going to try to, because we have this kind of puzzle and we have a few bricks and we really need to understand mechanisms also to make new patents maybe. But we need to start investigating what is the mechanism in various indications like obesity with this compound. So we just started up in vitro lab and in vivo lab, so we are actually an R&D company now, which is good.
Maybe one more question again, if it is not secret again, but just for the information of our young colleagues, what kind of investment are you looking for in moving your project forward now?
Well, I have been...
Usually people don't have idea.
No, I have been, maybe it's the high throughput screening background, I'm hitting everybody, kind of. So I'm talking to everybody. We bought this asset in March last year, so it's 1.5 years ago. Before that, I had one investor in, besides myself, of course, and it's a Swedish national investment fund that operates in this area. And it's about finding the right person who understands you and trusts you and believes you. I think people in that Swedish area now, they know me more. I mean, they read about me in the newspaper and stuff, so they trust me. I'm a little bit delayed compared to what I hoped to do, so I'm not so happy about that, but I stick to my plans and I do what I say and I say what I do. So that's one thing you can work on. Always have a plan for what to do and stick to it and be honest and transparent. We have experienced that private investors actually like this project. In Sweden, there's also a culture of private investors investing. And I spoke to ventures also, but well, for various reasons, we don't have ventures right now. We are now going to look for the next phase where we are going to need a lot of money, and there might be, well, it might be ventures, or it might be listings on the stock exchange. In Sweden, it's normal to list small companies, so that's the way. And we have also just registered ourselves as small, medium-sized enterprises in the EU to potentially get access to some of the funds that are there to finance clinical trials. So, of course, there's great competition about that, but we will at least try. So you have to think out of the box and then just be on roadshow and believe it in, and do your best and have fun on the way.
Okay, so one question.
And I understand correctly, one of your strategies is to make very early patents.
Yes.
But is it not a problem because the patent is running out?
Yeah.
20 years?
Of course, this is a problem if you're not in a project that get prioritized and actually get all the way, or if you start like this compound we bought, it was developed for another indication, and it was tried in a second indication where it didn't work. And then you have this actually, I think, very good compound, very nice asset, but with patents that are maybe a little bit on the old end. But we're working on that, and I'm working again in pharma industry. It's called life cycle management, meaning that when your patents are going to expire, you make a new formulation, or you make a new combination, or you make things. So there are ways, I mean, it's not the same as having a patent on your structure, but you can protect your business. And then it's also about defining how much money should you be able to earn, and what is driving you. Because as I said before, I'm not driven by earning a lot of money. I mean, I don't think it's really realistic that I can take this all the way out, but if nobody else is going to pick up, I'm going to try to, because I think it can change people's condition. And I spoke to the CEO of Lundbeck, Kåre Schultz, who used to be at Novo Nordisk, and he said, well, of course, we always look for projects with a very good patent situation, but if you can get a compound registered as a diabetes treatment, there's always money to make. It's a growing market. You saw yourself how much new patients come about, and there's so many people who can't afford the treatment that are the best treatments, or who don't have availability of it. I mean, insulin could be a cheap compound, but it's just not available in syringes and formulations. It's so there's maybe good compounds out there, but there's still a lot of people who don't have access to affordable, effective medicine. And I think this is what I'm driven by, to actually help providing that.
Okay, thank you very much again. Thank you.
You're welcome.